whenever in the second book the opposition of character 20 years later is whole notes, half notes, the fastest are eighth notes in the notation. I think it couldn't not suggest a choral fugue. It was the same meter used by Caspar Fischer, whom he borrowed from. But of course it can be the same, slightly less slow, since it's cut time. See how much we are prisoner of our eye translates to our brain, to our heart, our soul, everything, that these are eighth notes and 16th notes. So I think it's more driven. And this being half notes with whole notes, I think is more stretched. But it's really subjective. It doesn't have any objectivity to it. As a matter of fact, the E major of book 1 is in 4/4, and the E major of book 2 is in cut time. So you could say that 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3 is each beat because it's 4/4, and here it's by 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Question is how much you stretch your 2 of half notes. If you do 1, 2, 1, 2. If you play an instrument with good decay, a good acoustic and resonance, you can extend it. Or regardless of the acoustic and the instrument, you're convinced that this has to be more combined beats, and not bar by beats, but beats bars. That bar beat. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. It's compact. It's stretto, but you can also spread it. Quality and both quantity and quality of legato to be singing here I think has to be overlapping without pedal. Finger pedal. And you have to follow each voice. Mi, fa, sol, la, si, fa, si, la, sol, fa, sol. Alto or the tenor, sol, fa, sol, mi, fa, becoming suspension, mi, fa, sol, la, si, la, sharp C, dominant of the dominant for the first real comma, or the first real punctuation arrival. And there you have a square. Double whole note. And then these inner voices have on one side the melodies. There's nowhere to breathe. Voice in the sense of contrapuntal voice, not in the sense of singing, especially not in my case. But nevertheless, you have the point that you realize how he spreads his voices. They bloom so beautifully, so meaningfully, so stretchingly, so as if there is no end to his sentence. Well, there is a punctuation and arrival point, but on the way, everything moves in different aspects, the four voices. And the inner voices. So, played separately, they already sound good. but played together, they might confuse you, because then you think of this, you think of that. Oh, the soprano has this. Oh, the suspension in the tenor, suspension in the alto. Oh, the melody of the theme is in the right hand on the top. And it's like, oh, this, that. And you get, so it has to be not hectic, as I purposely spoke in that hectic way to describe it, but linear, following, as if they're colorized, or call it, if not color-coded, something that you follow them not only by their range, but also it could have been inverted. It happens to be. It's a bit like in zero gravity, the top and the bottom have no meaning. Everything top is bottom, everything bottom is top. And in Bach's polyphony, there is no upper and lower voice. Of course, they are in ranges, but they do have the capacity to be interchanged in terms of their positioning. The six becomes six thirds, becomes six, and then becomes. So it is seemingly an organization which reposes only on the agreement between the voices. Symphonos in Greek, from where symphony, in agreement. And you hear that more clearly in the vocal style, I say TB, motet style fugues, genre, not style. Well, the style is medieval, or Renaissance. Compared to I think it is clearly a difference of genre. The more keyboard fingered fugues, or more vocal fingered fugues. And they're all fingered anyway by essence, since you have to play them with your fingers, but with your mind, with your ears, with your hearing, with your soul, with your... Immerse yourself in his polyphony. When it comes to Book 1 E minor, one thinks of Metner, no. One thinks of Rachmaninoff, no. One thinks of Silotti. Not that the other pianists of Russia were not able, and they did their own, many transcriptions, but in the case of Silotti, this is what he did. He took E minor Book 1 with the motif of the left hand accompaniment portion, and he moved it in B minor in the right hand, and he added an imaginary chorale in the thumb of the left hand. Now to go back to Bach. What is so striking about this Prelude and Fugue in E minor is that the fugue is in two voices. In other words, in a two-voice invention full of imitation. But it couldn't be played so fast because of the augmented seconds. which are really distorted intervals who need to be separated to be meant in the articulation compared to the arpeggio, and then the chromatic descent with the E ostinato on the top, and then I think this is where you have to enter in the heart of the articulation to express the motivic elements, the arpeggio, the chromatic scale, the augmented seconds. And so I think it needs to be inhabited with different touches. So much can be said just with articulation. A variety of articulation of how to spell, mean, organize, destine. Of course, there isn't a single way. Your way. That's mine. But not always, because I am ready to think. Against my own conviction that it's possible to play it as a detached toccata touch, air legato beyond, touch air legato, or legato. And the reason for which this is possible is because a two-voice invention doesn't have the compact, heavy texture of a 3 or 4 voices fugue. So you can play legato without to be heavy. But if you play a 3 or 4 voices fugue legato, it becomes on the modern piano over intense because of the richness of the upper tones of each of the tones of the piano. And so you have to alternate the different touches in order to give it a legibility, a readability, a connectivity with the text for what it means to you and how you can best transmit it through the piano. So to go back to the prelude, aria, accompaniment, and harmonization. It's possible to play in the patterns of the accompaniment 2 slurred, 2 detached, and then 3 slurred and 1 detached. It gives a bit of elegance to the downbeat that is flourishing and then rising to the 6th, to the 5th, to the diminished 7th, between the 5th finger and the thumb. So there is a pattern inside the bass note, which is E, D sharp, E, D natural, C, B, A, G, and the harmonization, which is in fact the triads with the inversions, but passing tone in the side, which makes it pedal impossible, because if you pedal, then you hear. You need to clear up the passing tone to clarify how he builds in the pattern of 2 beats by the resonance, the root, the 3rd and the 5th. So you have to keep the notes of the harmony and not keep the notes of the passing tone, like the A in this case. And if you think it doesn't need to be harmonized, but just arpeggiated as written, you have a different touch for the E and the A, B, G, A, B, C, B, A, B, A, with the passing tones. They have this kind of step motion elegance, which is different from the harmonization of the bottom of the right hand, but combined you can get the harmonization and the melody and the bass. incorporate in your understanding, hearing, the motion of the tempo, the articulation of the elements, decorative patterns, harmonizations, arpeggiated thirds, and the aria suspended on long values with follow-on of release of short values, then the tempo can come in to define how much you can stretch the melodic line of the long value in terms of the decay. Of course, it's less obvious with the 30 seconds than when you hold the half note or the whole note. So you go back then to the medium tempo. Now do you restrike? It's always a double-edged choice to restrike, because it's too obvious, and at the same time, if you don't, then you feel like the note that comes is a tide, and then first short note after has its own impulse, which is wrong, since it's only the result of the fa, mi, re, mi, fa, mi, so, sorry, I breathed before the arrival note on the relative major in G major on the third B or the 10th. So all the decoration they could be replaced by one or the other, but what matters is to have the E, the F sharp, the A, the G, the F sharp, the D, the C, the B. You have to think of them, even if they decay. Of course, you won't sing them, especially not like me if you don't have a voice. But it was just a demonstration, which is impossible to do without. So if you play very soft on the edge of the keys, not very deep, the passing tones, and then the bass note a little more tenuto, and the melody sharp like an oboe sound, a very soft chord, and you find a tempo that is calm while moving forward. So this aria becomes followable with the right hand, and if you do a little bit slower tempo, of course he didn't write it in cut time, whatever that means really, because if it were, when I oscillate between different options, it doesn't mean I don't have an opinion. Obviously I mention it, but I am also open to rethink the paradigm. I'm not stubborn on one single way. What matters to me is how do we bring the texture to life, the long values, the short values, the 30 seconds, the trills measured. In this case, they become quasi 30 seconds in this faster tempo, and then the 2, 3, 4, 1, as if the E could be held. But he restrikes it by playing it in the pattern of the arpeggio in the left hand. I still think that this aria is more meditative than driven or instrumental, so it could be. Sometimes I also think that we have to take in account the importance of the rapport between the theme and variations, which is not the case, but it could be, between the prelude and the fugue. Because it feels in some of the preludes, like this one, that yes, it is an aria, but is mostly a wait and see preparation for the main dish, that is the fugue. And some cases it's not. For instance, in Book 2, he has two-voice invention in the prelude, unlike in the fugue of Book 1. So you have this pattern starting on the second 16th note, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, because it's in 3, 8, but in a group of 4 bars or 8 bars. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 3. Okay, I went 3 right away, but it's wrong. And so it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 bars, it could be a bar a beat, in which case you can play it lighter touch and faster. And this gives it a flow and a direction. So it could be that then the articulation of the ornament, like the mordents, literally biters in French, you bite on the next note, lighter touch, air legato even, and perhaps even measured trill or unmeasured trill. But you know, ultimately, I think even if it's exciting to play faster bar a beat, there is so much going on in the richness of the texture of the phrase, even if it shouldn't be heavy for the texture generally, but it has to be acknowledged. When you have different energies or synergy of the two combined. The 3 times 2 of the hemiola. In the left hand, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. So if you put them together, okay, now this is played as if in an enhanced way. But if you play it in tempo, you might just hear the same in both hands. And you lose that superimposed polypulse. So you have the time to do a little bit of air separation in the under tempo. I mean under from the fastest. But it's challenging to try to play it driven fast, but with all the lightness of touch and the breathing and the sub-articulations of each part. I think it brings a beehive of driven, I would say, precipitation effect. He often uses this Lombardic short long most composers would use the first longer and then the middle one short. It's lighter touch, and also it gives a clear notation where is the downbeat. But 1, 2 and then rest on 3. 1, 2 and rest on 3. And 1 being the downbeat when you start with an upbeat. While the left hand reproduces the right hand, but the right hand plays departure on the downbeat, the left hand departure on the second 16th note. Of course, the slower, the more you have time to even add more ornaments. Should you or not? That is another question. I don't think it's necessary when it's fast, because it's already very driven, and the tones of the piano as an instrument are very rich in harmonics, so it only can get blurrier when you want speed, crisp clarity. But not obviously verticality. You have still to keep the individuality on the layers. I think, yes, we always think about the layered polyphony of the voice melodically in layers, but also in the pulse. You can have at the same time independent pulse and independent voicing, and follow both. And when you look at the fugue of E minor Book 2, you realize that unlike in Book 1, he decides to do something drastically different, closer to D major Book 2, where he alternates the 4/4 and the 12/8. In other words, the triplets and the 16th note, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 2 2 3 2 2 3 4 4 2 3 4 1. And here he has triplets in the beginning of the departure of the subject, and then he has written out turns, therefore decorative because they have 16th notes, la, fa, sol, la, si, la, sol, si. Then suspension with an escape, which then extends the pattern of the beautiful choice of emotionally driven and extended intervals. You have, and then concludes the long subject with triplets. Superimposed. Because we know that they didn't notate back then the rhythm combination of 1/4 note of a triplet. The value of a triplet, they wrote it as a dotted 8/16 over the complete bundle of triplets with notes on each 8th note. So we were told that's how the supposed to be the alignment of the 16th note of the dotted 8 becomes 1/4 note on the triplet over the 3 notes. That's what De Meyer has did in the transcription of the Bach Cantata 147. And notes. But they didn't notate a 1/4 note, 8th note rest. So, I mean, a note. So, you know, perhaps they did, perhaps they didn't always. It's difficult to know that they had a written or unwritten rule in this case, just a notational acceptance. Swinging, the whole rapport of long and short changes when it's 1/4 note in triplet or dotted 8 in 16, articulated short 16th note or spoken 8th note of a triplet, which then becomes necessarily a little more soft in its articulation. Right hand, when he has these dotted rhythms, they overlap within the same hand, the voices. So you can play legato and non-legato to make sure you don't combine them. Mi fa sol si mi re do mi fa sol la fa mi fa re fa sol la si mi, because then it defeats the purpose of the stems up and down that you reach by your eyes, but you should complement by your ear and project. It's the same thing in 109's variation. composers write overlapping voicings within the same hand in the same obvious tight range, it's crucially important, in my opinion, to absolutely not combine them, or not allow them to be combined by the verticality of the playing. So I would choose perhaps the top to be louder and softer, and perhaps detach the bottom and the top legato. Also the eighth notes. Especially the leap of the seventh, which is to remain in the range. If not, he would have been. He didn't have that many notes anyway. So in order to compensate into the range, he has to go down a second and then up a seventh. It's like a change of bow in the flow of the continuation of the elements of the crisscrossing imitations in the right hand's two voices. Plus the triplets. These kind of things are so incredibly important, I think, because they are the richness of the texture, of the inventivity, of the creativity, of the complexity of Bach's thinking. Not only voices superimposed, but rhythms superimposed, pulses superimposed, everything superimposed, but everything thought, heard, followed, played, as if you manage all of them in individual layers. Each of the brains is one voice. And the other one is... Then the third one. And then the middle one. Nothing beats singing and playing mi, fa, sol, sol, re, do, si, la, sol, la, sol, fa, mi, re, mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, sol, la, fa, sol, la, si. I know it's pathetic when my voice breaks. I lost my head voice of solfeging childhood, but it's okay. I can voice it in my head, I hear it, I can speak it, I can say it mostly if I cannot sing the pitch. Re, mi, fa, sol, mi, fa, sol, la. Something similar to rhythm comes to mind in the development of K310. Like here. These overlapping dotted rhythms. Ah, so beautiful. Always creating a painful dissonance that is released up a down 16th note, or here if it's aligned then 3rd, 8th note, and you feel like there is a step-by-step rising of intensity. All these are markers through the piece. You can play, and you should play every beat, you should play every note, of course. Articulate, sing, voice, organize, and then always have a direction. It goes somewhere. Further. Details are incredibly spicing the section with the different types of minor descending and ascending. Okay, it's details, but you still have that at least 4 bars of 4/4 with all these different rhythms of triplet, 16th note and quarter notes as a flow of intensity, drive, and you feel like once it started you cannot give up the excitement that keeps you going on between the voice leadings, the entrances of the different voices. I think in that sense I cannot imagine, not only because it's in cut time, that this fugue can be slower. Because it'll be very difficult to maintain that direction when you're more by the beat than by the bar beat. which point you want to reach before you give up on the tension. It doesn't have to be every harmonic tension release. It has to be the direction of the thematic material. In this case, it's a rising of a scale and then redescending. Even if it has patterns of stop and start with turns. Because if you resume it, you can do. I'll think of the highest note that I'm wanting to reach and not give up until there in terms of the intensity. Like the high A, and then the lower E, and then same thing with the B. The bottom B. This way I have a clear direction towards which I go as a magnetic attraction. Nothing can stop me except, of course, I play the triplets, the 16th notes, the phrasings, the subarticulations. If you want to do 2 and 1, legato for the conclusion of the subject, or a combination. It doesn't hurt to over ornament in the decoration of the articulation choices. It gives even more variety. Perhaps it also it takes away from the focus direction. Of course, if you had written would have been simplistic, but in a way you have to think that as a driving direction and aim and target, and everything else goes towards it. And this is a mighty long subject compared to D major book 2. Or book 1. Okay, then some are very short and some are very long. B minor book 1. It has chromaticism, sequence, leaps, sixths, fifths, appoggiaturas, starting on the upbeat, all the effects together, if I may say. It's almost like a super deluxe for the expression, for the spiritual uplifting, for the... Yes, it is that. Spiritual uplifting is more than ever what I always find pours out through the music of his fugues. As if he's organizing some kind of idealized celestial organization of planets, something of that level. And that each voice has its much meaning by itself, as much place among the others in their ways of interacting among each other and by themselves. And that is what makes, I think, definitely a fugue an incredibly spiritual endeavor. Of course, the two-voice fugue in the E minor book 1 sounds more what it is, a two-voice invention. But nevertheless, it is striking to know that he didn't do any other in two voices. That's it. There is no 6, and there is no only 1, 2. Well, the only 6 is in the musical offering. Now the F major is extremely challenging for the pianist. Well, the other ones too. Each one is. But then it brings such a jubilant. It's a jubilant thing to play Bach music, even when it's tragic, even when it's dramatic, even when it's peaceful, even when it's you can call it anything you want. I happen to call the happy ones or the settled ones to call them pastoral. But then when you have the playful, you have often these 16th notes against 8th notes. So when you start practicing this, you want to articulate evenly, but you want also to subphrase. When you have 16th notes, you can have 3 times 2 or 2 times 3. And sometimes he alternates. In the left hand is clearly 1, 2, 3, 4. But in the right hand you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. If you look at the design of the patterns of the right hand, well, of course it will be the same from when the left hand plays it. So in 12/8 it should be 3 times 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1. But it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. He doesn't mark it with the phrasing, he doesn't mark it with the accent. Of course, if it's exaggerated, it sounds. That is, too much. But on the other hand, not enough would be that. It's not too much, it's not enough, it's nothing. So it doesn't have to do that it's bad because it's nothing, but you can suggest, you can hint rather than exaggerate, as I just did for the demonstration. Like when you change bow, you have no accent, but you have a new energy. And it's cradling in the groups of 2 times 3. He could have done. The 3 times 2. And not So I think it's very subtly suggested, hinted. It gives a separate pulse between the left hand, where you can bring the slur of the first of the 2 or the second of the 2. If you want to do short long or long short. Or none and just a little hint. Be slurred by say. We've seen already so far how many times he uses whole notes, tied whole notes, which die completely whichever tempo you would take, whichever instrument you would play. But he doesn't repeat them because of the elegance of the organization of the voices. And here all of a sudden, in a possibly fast tempo, and perhaps moderate even as well, the 16th notes that are in dialogue between the 2 hands, half a bar each. The trill or mordant is traditional to measure the ornaments in Bach, like in the first Bertita. It gives a pretty organized point of view of the chaos of nature organized by man. That's in a way very much the Haydn sonata form, that's Bach's fugue. It's a way to organize the chaos of nature with a sense of harmony that you organize among them. And when it's unmeasured, like a shivering or a squeak even, and in this fast tempo, obviously it's not for decay purposes, and even if it's not fast. It doesn't matter. So it's not about that. It's about maintaining the energy while the decay happens in order to have this intensity, almost as if you create a crescendo on a held note by repeating it, which sounds very awkward. So you do the neighboring notes. But when you have 16th notes, which are almost the speed, that shouldn't be. I think aligned is not good. Triplet is better, possibly 30 seconds. A lighter touch from the edge on the keys. And then the 16th note by the organization 2 times 3 in this case, because I insist on this chemiolization. It's too much jumping. You know, that is why people never get satisfied with themselves. Because you read, you understand, then you try, and the rendering doesn't correspond to what eventually your eyes elevate you to hope to do, to make. And even an independent, measured, unmeasured, subphrased in hemiola or not. Then of course if you play a slower tempo, in terms of giving yourself the chance to really distinguish the trills from the 16th notes, it's evident, self-evident, except that it looks good on the spot, but it doesn't construct your 4-bar, 8-bar, 12-bar, 16th-bar structured hypermeter organization of the chaos of nature. 5 of 4, 5 in 5, 5 of 6, and again 6 going through the circle of Fs. Good. You can mention that because you watch it, you see it, you hear it in your inner ear when you see it, and you think, okay, how will I render it so it's visible, understood, as well as playful? And I think that it has to have a pulse that doesn't have the individual beat too heavy, but a group of beats that becomes a flow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now I knew 1, 2, 3, even if it's half bars of harmony change. And then a beat, a harmony. So you went from 4 beats, a harmony change, to half bar harmony change, to beat harmony change. That's a harmonic accelerando of the pulse, of the rhythm of the harmony. And I think that when you get to this point, you realize that you should not rush because the music is enticing you to do it. So you have to be at the same time controlling, at the same time releasing the energy of the piece and controlling from over rushing. But let the natural feel of the rush from the harmonizations by half bar to a quarter bar by the beat to become by itself expressive. If not, he would have continued by half bar harmonies. Which is fine too. Except that's not what he did, because he gives an impulse by creating a harmonic accelerando of the change of harmonies. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. And he starts at the beginning or the middle of the bar. Since he's in 12/8, when this is in the beginning. That's even Haydn does in his E-flat sonata. Obviously in the first beat, the beginning, and then all of a sudden you find it on the middle of the bar when it comes back. And it seems to me like this is a little bit more of an eye catcher than an ear catcher, because 12/8 could be 2 bars of 6/8 anyway, because de facto it is, or 4 bars of 3/8 if you want. And so regardless, it's for the eye more than for the listener, but you want to translate the texture with all its juicy, fruity, harmonic, melodic, pulse, rhythmic, hemiolic, harmonic progression of tempo, evolution, and patterns of hands responding to each other or playing together. The 16th notes, so the busyness towards the arrival point. These are the elements that should nourish the final choice of the tempo. But I still think that a musician who has intuition doesn't need only explanation, only analysis, only therefore because, or because this will happen, I should be careful not to do this before that, because then you become just cautious for the purpose of being cautious. When you have time to practice, you do the rhythms, and then you practice, and then you add the rhythms for the trills. Yes, ultimately it's all about bringing yourself to embrace and aim towards which relentlessly you get to. And if it takes 1 day or 100 days or 20 years, ultimately doesn't matter, because you have a drive. You do other things, you are disappointed with your solutions, you try other options, you rethink the piece, you go back to it, you listen to others, you analyze it, you rethink it, you write it down, perhaps it gives you time to space it and place it, and then you play it. And at some point it becomes you. And that's what I think is important, because then the tempo, the phrasing, the articulation, or the dynamics for the interpretation sort of fit in place with the essential elements of pace and pulse. Or lighter. Lighter, not fast. Heavier, not fast. Not very convincing. Or light and fast. You define the genre of each of them, what it means to you, because you're not playing every time the 24, 48, all of them. And they don't have to be played, let less in the order of chromaticism, which is really the demonstration of the tuning of the time for the purpose of the well-tempered clavier, being tuned with a well-tempered temperament. But each prelude, each fugue should have some kind of connection and sometimes of contrast. That is also a way to connect them, by disconnecting them, or connecting them by organizing some kind of flow from one to the other in terms of pulse. But by themselves, they are like an autonomous group of two. And the point of all the pieces is the fugue. Of course, he writes incredibly beautiful, meaningful, emotional, driven, exciting, jubilational preludes, my God. So that, in fact, they should be just the preparation for the fugue being the main dish. But this is amazing, because you have two main dishes. And each of them has its own character, revealing to you perhaps itself differently through time. Oh, I should have played it faster when I was younger. Why didn't I not see that? This pulse brings me to this, and so it's refreshing. It's a gift that keeps on giving. It's a friend who reveals itself differently to you through the path of life. Believe me, I can attest to that. And sometimes you wonder, how will I ever play this one, because I still don't get it. And you have to be humble enough to accept it, regardless of the fact that the salt shaker being on the wrong side, little is left to find out how to do it convincingly. And perhaps you'll never find. But the point is to search. The jubilant drive. That is, as the philosophers say, the aim is the trip itself. Okay, you can start like that, or you can think if it's in 3/8. Because it's more driven or more elegant with more subarticulations. I think in the beginning it's important to be under tempo because you have to first organize your thoughts, organize your voices, sing, play, write, chew, solfège, and then play all of them. And so then you go back and you think, okay, now I will do the middle voice because of its imitation. Then you go to the tempo. Of course, you have to think more faster in advance and to organize these, but you realize that some of the 3/8 are really meant to be a 12/8 or a 24/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then of course you have the little extra for the transition, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, again transition. 5, or we call it episode. And you find that this way the upbeat is always rebouncing, which gives it such a sense of rebouncing and lightness in the jubilation. And in the fugue of book 2 he writes it in 16th note, so inevitably that 6/16 could be a 3/8 or 3/16 here. Or you play considered often as a jig of sorts. Fa mi fa do, la sol la ré, do ré mi fa mi ré do ré si la sol fa mi si la ré sol ré do fa si ré do sol si do si do ré mi fa sol fa mi si la sol do mi fa si la do fa mi fa so fa mi ré mi do si la sol la ré do mi do ré si do ré mi fa si do si do so si la sol do si do so fa mi ré do si la sol do la so fa mi ré do si la ré do si la si. I know it's silly, sorry, forgive me. But it was fun. Do, si, do, fa, mi, re, mi, la, sol, la, si, do, si, la, sol, la, fa, mi for the answer. You can, in my case, solfège it faster than I can play it, at least today. If I need to, I'll practice it to reach that same crisp articulation, lightness, and laughing. It's like angels enjoying, it's jubilant. It doesn't have to be fast to be jubilant. It can be medium jubilant. Oops, not in the tritone, sorry for that. Yeah. Always bring out the attention to the arrival notes. And inside, a lighter, crispy touch for the 16th note, so you hear. Enough of my silliness. I think that interpretation in a fugue is almost like something that you add, but in fact it should be something from which you take. You nourish yourself, your thirst, your hunger, your drive, your passion, your desire is to play it in a way that is so jubilant that nothing else can matter until you reach it, and even if it takes you longer. You have to be relentless about it, and you have to be never giving up. finding solutions, finding which hand has what, because very often the middle voice is shared between the two hands' thumbs, because you have to play the upper and outer voices with the top right hand and the bottom with the left hand in this three-voice fugue. Well, I think that what makes me so driven when I choose how to play a Bach fugue is that I have some kind of a projection image of its character as a call, and I try to reach it. And I practice until I get it. I recorded these pieces when I was young, and I don't regret, because you could say, oh, I was too young, what did I know? Fine, I only spent 10 years copying them and playing them voice by voice as a student, and then I decided to play it as a pianist, which is not the same thing, because you have to really play and not speak, sing anymore, like I demonstrate for the experiment now. But what I think is that when I hear some of them, with time now passing, almost 30 years ago, not sure I accept some of the ritenuti at the end, some of the tempi I took, not all, or touches or choices of articulation. I remember having practiced a lot detached before to play them in the recording studio, and then in the acoustic of the place it sounded too dry. And I realized that to connect the meaning of the notes, I had to play more connected, not per se legato, but then it changed the whole balance of the articulation, of the organization of all these elements that are supposed to be so individualized as they are in their lines that are superimposed. And if I were to record them today, I probably will do differently. For some, perhaps for others not, but not for the purpose of it. It's just that I grew up with them since even more. I learned them as a child, I recorded them as a young man, I teach them as an old man. Well, not all of them, because most students don't play many. But let's say some, and for some reason mostly the same ones, because I guess they hear it from each other. But the very idea that you work on a prelude and fugue is that you can display all these qualities in your playing, regardless if it's a singing slow fugue or a articulation-driven fast fugue.